How do you feel when you switch to Geico and save on your car insurance? It's like going to work on one Thursday morning and thinking to yourself, just one more day until Friday. But then somebody in the elevator says, Happy Friday! Then you check your phone quickly and discover today is actually Friday. So yes, Happy Friday, random stranger in the elevator. Happy Friday indeed. Yep, switching and saving with Geico feels just like that. Get more with Geico.
Ooh, a spicy question. I
because
love
the writing is sort of everything, right? Like you kind of can fix plot holes, but if the writing is
so some readers love that, and some readers are like, "But I wanted more of this." So it's kind of a gamble.
Hello and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. On today's episode, I am joined by one of Peters, Fraser and Dunlop's literary agents, Daisy Chandley. Hello, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for coming. I'd love to sort of start at the beginning of your career, although I think it's quite a direct line. Was it in
Very, very straight line.
Yeah, was it 2019 when you joined PFD?
Yeah, so I joined in 2019 and I was working as the sort of PA to our CEO for about 6 months and then moved across at the start of 2020, I think literally sort of January, to be the agent's assistant for two of our senior agents, which was a great time to start an entirely new job, which, you know, involved learning how to do contracts and, you know, really like learning the ropes. But, you know, like thankfully, obviously, I was going to be surrounded by all my colleagues, which, worked out for all of 2 months until I had to go home and do my job from a bunk bed with my sister below me sort of watching TikToks all day. So thankfully that still somehow worked. And then, it's been a sort of incredibly straight line since then. I mean, they were incredibly supportive, thankfully. So I, worked under them with their lists, building my own list, until, at some point you get the official, associate title. And then more recently, I think about 2 weeks ago, went to being a full agent. So now have been passing off the assisting work to our wonderful new assistant, which has been really weird and feels very, the sort of end of an era, beginning of an era, all that. But and incredibly, I've spent the last, 5 years now at the same desk. So.
Oh, you haven't even moved around the office?
No. I mean, I moved after when I stopped being the PA, but I have, and I was really, it was quite a big thing. I thought that when I became an agent, I would move desk because, that desk is near my sort of old boss's offices. They're like, no, don't worry. You haven't even got to think about it. I'm too messy. There's too much of my stuff to even consider moving it. Unfortunately, I don't think anyone would try and turf me out.
Oh, that's fair enough. So is there the difference between like assistant, associate agent, literary agent? Like how do the responsibilities change as that kind of progresses?
It's a very good question, and a question that my parents and partner would always ask me when those titles changed. And it's sometimes hard to give a definitive answer about. But I mean, it's one of the things I really like about agenting actually is just how sort of clear-cut the career ladder is in some senses. So, you start off often as an agent's assistant or an agency assistant, often the difference being if you're an agency assistant, you're probably assisting a larger number of agents. If you are an agent's assistant, then it's, one or two maybe. I was the second of the two. So I was just assisting two agents. And then in theory, associate is when you are assisting, but also building your own list. You will often be doing that for a fair while before you get given that title change, much in the same way that that's the case in a lot of jobs. I know it's the same on the editorial side. And then, you'll do that for a while. And then when I guess going from associate to agent is a bit more of a like solid line, because that's when you are no longer, in theory, there might be exceptions to this, I don't know, but certainly, at PFD, you will stop doing any assisting work and you will just spend all of your time on your own client list. So I guess it's, it's when you get to a point where you and the company together feel that, you've got enough of your own list that, you need to devote all your time to that. And also that you're on your way to sort of sustaining yourself financially in the future, hopefully.
Yeah. I'm picturing it sort of like a Venn diagram that's sort of slowly moving as your sort of responsibilities change and then separates completely once you become a literary agent.
That sounds like a perfect metaphor in the sense that it's like so confusing and hard to picture.
Yeah. It's easy to sort of generalize your
which
duties,
makes it totally
I guess.
appropriate.
Yeah.
No, exactly. You just like are slowly sort of, doing less of the assisting. But, the assisting is obviously what gives you the skills to do it yourself. And I chose to hold on to doing assisting work maybe even longer than I needed to, partly because I just did feel like I was learning so much from it all the time. And because my bosses do in some ways quite different books to what I do, it meant that I was seeing a really large range of contracts and dealing with a really large range of situations and, people who have managers and lawyers and getting into all the sort of stuff that, you wouldn't necessarily come across when you're starting to build your own list, but that you just feel so much more confident and prepared for whatever weird situation could come up if you've already seen it all before.
Yeah, because I guess it'll still be your first time. It'll still be daunting when those kinds of things happen. But having sort of experienced those secondhand or like on the sideline or like in an assisting capacity, obviously you kind of know what to expect.
Absolutely. And you're sort of, because when you're doing stuff as an assistant, especially once you've been doing it for 5 years, you are often sort of making choices with people. You're the one who's, sort of been at the coalface a lot, and, your opinion will often be, taken very seriously when there are problems. But at the end of the day, the judgment call is still going to be made by that agent. And so it's sort of watching those judgment calls that's so educational.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I'm very detail oriented. This now sounds like it's the part of the interview where I say all the things that I'm really bad at. Unfortunately, I'm too focused on details. But I'm detail oriented, and I can get a bit sort of, in my head sometimes about, but what if this happens and what if this happens? And I think once you've been in the industry for long enough, you feel confident enough in yourself and in the way that things work to be like, but it's fine, it won't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the sort of confidence that can only come from just watching things happen over and over again and from just living through it as many times as possible so that you can be rest assured and saying to a client, look, at the end of the day, this isn't going to happen. And it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things that you can be told how something's going to go, or like in detail, sort of what the stages are that happen whenever what it is you're talking about goes on. But until you've been in the middle of it, until you've like seen it firsthand, it's hard to fully comprehend the situation.
Absolutely. And to know what's normal and to be able to sort of read situations and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's that you can only do it, by sort of watching it happen a million times. All of which is to say, I guess, that, the sort of way that climbing the ladder and agenting works, where, you do assist often for years before you're sort of, on your own 2 feet, is great. And I know that there are some people, who feel, especially on the publishing side, I think, where it can be quite tough to move up on the publishing side. But I found the sort of entire process of coming up like that through the company to be fantastic and like just really, really worked for me. And again, everyone's been, sort of so supportive at every point of it. So shout out PFD. Thank you.
Big shout out to PFD.
Big shout out.
Was it always the plan? I know you came in as a PA, but was it always the plan that you wanted to end up as a literary agent?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was too young to really have a plan in any sort of capital P sense. I mean, before I was agenting, I was off in Amsterdam working as a waitress because I'd left uni, and none of the jobs that were sort of put in front of me appealed to me in the slightest. I didn't do English at uni like a lot of people who I work with did. I did PPE, so politics, philosophy and economics, and I really didn't want to be a consultant. I really didn't want to be part of some like vast team that I didn't really know actually what product we were making or selling. And I didn't really know what the other options were. I didn't know what sounded fun to me. The whole sort of pyramid scheme of recruiting, where it's like, yeah, you're a recruiter for a recruitment scheme that works in recruiting recruiters for recruitment schemes. A lot of that, and that didn't speak to me. So I just spent all my time out there reading, and I was like, man, imagine if this could be a job. Applied for 1 million jobs in publishing. I mean, 1 million. I still have the list somewhere on my computer of everything I applied for and was, didn't get. And got an internship at RCW, which is another literary agency. And I remember my first day there. I got called in, basically. I got drafted in because the other intern, I think, like, dropped out on the day. And they were like, basically, whichever, it was a Hunger Games. It was like, whichever of the other interns could turn up can have this, was what I remember it being. And I was like, I'm there. And I think I was on my way there, Googling literary agent. Because, I think a lot of people, when they're trying to get into publishing, are mostly applying for editorial jobs and stuff like that. Because unless you grow up surrounded by this world of, like publishing and media and the arts, it's not that that's the only interesting thing. It's just that it's so hard to know what any of the other jobs entail. It's as so many writers say, it's such a mysterious world. Mm-hmm. I had a vague sense of what a literary agent was, but I was like, what do they do on a day-to-day basis? What's this going to actually look like? And I got there, and there was an associate agent probably at the desk next to me, and she had a pile of proofs on her desk, and she was having an argument down the phone. And I thought, that's my dream job. Oh my God,
having
that's my dream
arguments
job.
down the phone.
She's reading and she's having an argument. I didn't know you could get paid for reading and having an argument. And it was. Both that was the job and that was the dream. So yeah, I'm not even sure what question of yours I'm answering at this point.
I don't think it matters anymore.
I don't think it
we're
matters.
just getting a glimpse into Daisy Chandley, the literary agent.
But getting a glimpse into Daisy Chandley, the talker, yeah.
Let's refocus. Let's get onto what you kind of are doing, what you do. So as of recently, full-time literary agent, very exciting. Yes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What age groups and genres is it that you have on your list and you're looking to add to your list?
Yeah, so I do adult, and I don't do any children's. I don't do any YA, not because I don't love it, but just because I don't read enough of it to know what's good. And we have a fantastic children's YA team at PFD who handle all of that. So yeah, I do adult, and I've had to split it into sort of 3 categories to make sense of it. So the most sort of expansive one of those is somewhat dark, ideally witty, really bold fiction. So that can go all the way from the sort of slightly more upmarket, but really brilliantly written stuff like A Visit from the Goon Squad and Detransition Baby, all the way to super literary, super weird stuff like Under the Skin or In the Cut or Shirley Jackson. I've got an incredible sort of Shirley Jackson-esque book out next year called Idle Grounds by Christelle Bamford, which scared the hell out of me the first time I read it, but is also just so funny and completely original. And that's what gets me excited more than anything. So, thrillers and horror could fit into this category, but so could quite unconventionally heartwarming upmarket fiction. I'm sort of less focused on exactly what genre you're writing in, and more if it feels like you're doing something that is brave and playful and interesting, whether that's on the more commercial side or more literary. And then heavy rom-coms, again with the funny. I've got a brilliant author, Georgia Stone, whose first rom-com, The Friendship Fling, is out next year and is a really great example of what I love in this space, which is those books like Greta and Valdin or Nora Ephron films, which are staggeringly romantic, but really dry and smart. And I'm very open to more literary or unusual romances that might not fit the sort of conventional rom-com packaging, like something with one foot in the speculative. But equally, I'm certainly not allergic to more conventional commercial rom-coms, as long as they're really funny. And they don't need to be reinventing the wheel. One thing I'll say on the rom-com side is that I think people have got into their heads that the way to make a rom-com stand out is having both of the protagonists have really weird jobs. You don't need to go through all of that. Just make them sound like real people and make them have fun with each other. Lastly, sleuths. I was a huge Nancy Drew kid, and I'm a really big fan of Japanese detective fiction and Twin Peaks. So I'm really drawn to an amateur sleuth or an unconventional detective. I don't do straightforward police procedurals. So when I say detective, we're thinking more sort of Benoit Blanc, Knives Out, or sort of Dale Cooper than a grizzled DI. I love clues and twists, and sort of, as ever, I'm happy for this to sit anywhere from the more dark and literary side to a more playful commercial approach. So, for instance, I've got one author, Anna Fitzgerald Healy, whose book Etiquette for Lovers and Killers is out next year, which is a sort of playfully dark, sharp, sexy mystery with quite the body count. Whereas then I've got a wonderful writing duo, JD Brinkworth, who've got a series called The Pie and Mash Detective Agency, which is more on the sort of cozy, funny side. So I think by going, I try and be quite specific with, those sort of categories that I like. And then I really like to see people, not interpreting my brief in different ways, but who have written things that fall into those spaces, but in a really large variety of tones and approaches. So yeah, if anything that feels like it's sort of ticking those boxes, anything that's weird and brave, and that can be brave in terms of the voice or brave in terms of, like tackling something in the plot, then I'm always really excited to see that.
Okay, so something more out of the box, something a bit unusual is what you're looking for, something to make you kind of stop and think,
Absolutely. And yeah, witty. I mean, when I say witty, I've got books like, Phoebe Stux's amazing Dead Animals, which came out last year, which, are really heart-wrenching and quite dark, and it might be like, well, how is that witty? But actually, I mean, there are moments of real humour in it, but I think it's witty more than anything, just in the sense of being sort of self-aware and, maybe having a bit of something like tongue-in-cheek to it, or a little bit playful, even if that's in the most sort of dark and heart-wrenching way possible. Just, something a little bit wry or arch about it really, really works for me.
Okay. And you also rep nonfiction?
Yeah, I do also do nonfiction. And on that front, it's much harder to sort of sum up because, to be honest, it's anything that feels like a book, which sounds ridiculous,
okay.
But it's just, I think I like things that are helpful. And that can be, I mean, I do like gift books. So I've got a handful of clients. I don't think any of them specifically have been announced yet. But, like beautifully designed gift books, stuff in the like art history space, like sort of more fun pop cultural history stuff. But then, I have a client called Lauren McQuiston with an amazing Instagram account called Brutal Recovery, and she's got her book No Lost Causes Club, which is about her having to get sober when she was in her early 20s. But it's sort of a combination of like self-help and memoir with this, again, a really sort of darkly funny tone to it. But again, it's something that's helpful and something that has a really clear audience who are going to pick that book up for a reason and get something out of it. I love reading really beautiful narrative nonfiction. It's definitely something that I'd like to do more of. But the things that I do find that excite me when they come in or when I come across those authors is something where I'm like, oh my God, this is a book. This is something which people would really want to pick up and which hasn't been gone into in this much detail by someone who knows this much about it, and which is going to be like genuinely helpful for people in their lives, whether that's like emotionally or to take around a gallery with them. And there's something in that I find really satisfying.
Okay. In terms of your list, do you have is it sort of an even split between fiction and nonfiction, or do you lean one way?
It's very like buses coming along at once. So okay. I'll find that I have a sort of chunk of nonfiction coming up and then a chunk of fiction coming up. I think it's probably a little bit more fiction. But now that I'm agenting full time, I've got more time for the nonfiction side, because often nonfiction projects come out of approaching somebody. Obviously, we do get nonfiction submitted to us, but I would say that probably a larger portion of people's nonfiction lists than fiction lists come out of the agent approaching a client.
Yeah.
And so obviously having more time frees me up to do more of that. So maybe the balance will even out a bit.
Okay. And I just had one follow-up question. So just adult, you don't represent young adult. Where do you stand on this sort of emerging space of new adult?
I mean, I haven't seen a submission that calls itself new adult. I'm sure I might have had some of them and not spotted it. Personally, it's not something that has come up really in any conversations I've had with publishers. I'm not remotely saying that it's not happening and it's not out there. I think maybe it's happening more in spaces that I'm not in as much, like the sort of more romantic-y type spaces where I know that things are, the sort of ages in those more fancy romantic spaces are getting really blurred because, you know, sort of people really want stuff that's at sort of the top end of YA, as it were, you know, because they want stuff that's maybe a little bit more adult, maybe a little bit more sexy, but sort of still generally in that YA space. And those are the sorts of situations where I can see new adult coming up as a conversation. For the most part, I think that if you're submitting, it's probably worth committing to it being adult or YA based on what it feels like the agent that you are sending it to mostly does.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because if I see new adults in a submission, I would probably think that might be a little bit YA for my tastes and for my list. Whereas if you're writing it and you genuinely, you know, if you genuinely think that this is a book for, albeit new adults, then I would just say adult, and sort of leave that to the agent to see if they want to pitch it onwards in that way and maybe raise it, you know, if it gets to the point where you're having a conversation with the agent, you know, maybe bring this up. But I think it might be something that sort of scared people off a bit about it not falling into their adult or into their YA world.
Yeah, it's interesting because, the agents I've spoken to who have seen this the most, I think, and who are kind of taking this on their list is agents who represent young adult. And I guess, it makes sense with what you're saying, where if you've written this thing and it's new, you would say new adult to maybe a YA agent, but if you're sending it to an agent who reps adult, you can just say adult. Like, they don't need that categorization, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it makes sense that YA agents are seeing more of that. Again, because I think the age categories are blurring more on their end than they are on ours.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And you brought up romantasy. I did want to ask a bit about this because obviously it's having a sort of boom at the moment. It's the big trend. And then probably before that we had like cozy crime and stuff like that. And that's not to say that these are going anywhere. Cozy crime definitely, I think, will become a mainstay now, like psychological thrillers and stuff. But have you got any predictions or maybe are you hopeful that whatever the next book trends might be?
I mean, one thing that I'm really seeing at the moment is stuff with 1 to, at this point, both feet in horror, which works very well for me, both in terms of my taste and my list. But a lot of the editors that I'm meeting with who, once upon a time were maybe happy for something to sort of have its toes in horror, are now like looking for the biggest sort of shock factor possible, which I think, you know, there were some really big books like Boy Parts that I think shifted our perception of what the sort of normal level of unpleasantness can be in a relatively mainstream book. And it feels now like it's sort of a race to the bottom or race to the top of, you know, coming up with more and more insane and slightly grim concepts. And I think part of that, I think there are a lot of things that are feeding into that. And again, you know, this is obviously not remotely on the scale of romantasy or cozy crime, because this is more, you know, in the sort of literary space. But I think it's the influence of Japanese fiction being so big, a lot of which, you know, like is quite dark. I think it's also just looking, books that like that have these really wild horror elements. It gives them that one-line pitch a lot of the time, whereas sort of slightly more lyrical gothic stuff might not. So I'm definitely, that is a thing that's coming out of a lot of my meetings with editors. And when I look at sort of, stacks of books coming out next year, the number of them that, once upon a time would have probably been considered, sort of in the genre horror space and are now being, sort of celebrated and sold as literary fiction is fantastic. I think it's great. I think it makes me aware of the whole sort of pitchability thing, which, I think writers probably struggle with, as much as we do and editors do and, sales teams do, is just the, ever increasing desire to be able to sort of sum something up in a line, and to have a really, really grabby hook to it. And that often does make a book, or not make a book. It often means that a book has something really original that it's doing. If you can say something in a line and someone goes, oh, I've not read something like that before, that's dealing with this new thing, that's, a really like smart setup. But there are so many books that we all know and love that you probably couldn't really do that for. And so it is a bit of a shame in that respect that, that it needs to have such a sort of shocking one-line pitch to be like breaking through at the moment. Well, if the payoff is that we get sort of fantastic, horrible, gothy books, then I'll put up with it.
About that kind of, when you talk about everything, all this horror stuff feels like it needs to be more kind of shocking and more kind of jaw-dropping. I really felt this. I worry about how desensitized we are becoming as a sort of audience, because I was talking to my friends the other day about The Gentleman, the television series. It's the Guy Ritchie thingy, but I watched all of that, and my friend said, she was saying, I had to stop watching after like 2 episodes because there was this scene, and I was like, it was just too much. And I thought to myself, what scene could possibly be too much in that? And then I realized I've watched all of The Boys, and nothing in The Gentleman even like remotely horrifies me, even though it should.
Should it? I mean,
there's bits in it.
I'm probably the wrong person for that question, because I'm a huge American Psycho fan. The book, not even the nice film with no rodents that put anywhere they shouldn't be. I'm not gonna try and wade into sort of issues of what should and shouldn't be in books, but I don't feel like novels on the whole are likely to be desensitizing us too much. I think that we are all, if anything, we're being desensitized by the way that news is handled more than anything. And I think that, I love dark, irreverent fiction. I think often the point of those books is that you are meant to feel unsettled and uncomfortable, often more so than their sort of TV counterparts. Again, going back to Boy Parts, just because sort of, I referenced that, and I guess that was one of the sort of turning points in the genre. That's meant to be a really unpleasant book. And, I know that author herself is confused sometimes when people are really hardcore rooting for female protagonist. So I think that, we can't control what response a person has to a book, I guess. People can feel a gleeful response at a horrible book that was, the author, if anything, maybe, intended them to feel a bit unsettled by it. But that's what happens when you, write and publish a book. It's out of your hands. And, it's probably not, I don't think it's rotting the minds of the nation, thankfully.
No, I think I agree, because, one of the great things about literature and reading a book is that you are a participant as the reader. You get to take what the author has written and then with your own imagination think of it, so you can kind of scale that as much or as little as you want in your head. I think it's much more an issue for television, where I've seen too many how to phrase this, I've seen too many exploding appendages on television that now I'm just like, okay, I've seen that many times before, you know what I mean? But it's different with a book
Yeah.
when you're imagining it, when you're like, you can imagine things in different ways. And that's the magic of reading, really.
It is the magic of reading.
Exactly. We are at the point in the episode where we ship Daisy off to be marooned. And I ask, Daisy, if you were stranded on a desert island with a single book, which book do you hope that it would be?
So it would be very easy to say one of the various books that I reference as saying, I would love to find something like this, blah, blah, blah. But like, I don't want to be on a desert island with In the Cut or with Under the Skin. I really, really don't. I've got enough problems already. And so I would want my ultimate comfort book, which is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I have listened to, like hundreds of times maybe over the course of my life. I've had it as an audiobook since I was really young and used to just play it on loop until it occurred to me at the age of like 17 to maybe listen to any of the others in the series, which are all fantastic as well, but none of them are the first one. I have a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy tattoo because they let 18-year-olds make choices.
Oh, wow.
And so it would have to be that. And also it's got the spirit of being marooned and trying to get yourself out of sticky situations. It would feel appropriate.
Oh, yeah.
It would feel like it would motivate me and inspire me to believe that I could probably somehow get off the island in one piece.
Yeah, because the Earth is probably going to get destroyed anyway to make way for a galactic hyperwave.
Either it would motivate and inspire me, or it would just like allow me to like slip into a state of completely not caring and just waiting for sort of death to come.
Apathy.
It's exactly, get you a book that can do both.
What, if you mind me asking, what's the tattoo?
It is, I drew it myself, which again, choices. It is the whale, which anyone who's read it,
and
or actually
Petunia.
I think seen the dreadful film with Zooey Deschanel. So that the whale is called Petunia. I named her Petunia. I didn't do the petunias as well.
Right.
So she's called Petunia. And she's saying, don't panic. There's a speech bubble. Yeah, you can picture how great this thing I drew when I was 18 looks. There's a speech bubble saying, don't panic. And my parents did sign off on it when I was 18 because, as they should. I'd had the idea for many years. I'm an adult. You can do what you want with your body. But I came back and their sort of faces went white and they realised they'd never asked me how big it was going to be. And the answer is reasonably large.
Okay.
I don't regret it.
Okay, good. I absolutely adore that book. It's definitely on my list if I were to pick a book to go to the desert island with.
Do you like any of the other ones in the series?
The thing is, it's been such a long time since I read the whole set, but I every now and again do reread or like listen to the first one again because it's like short and it's a great one to just like, if I'm in like a reading rut.
It's just so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll get you right back out.
Yeah, absolutely. I literally reread it last month. So
Oh, a fellow fan.
It's excellent. Awesome. So next up, we're going to get into cover letters, queries, maybe even some super specific things that Daisy might be excited to see in her inbox. But that's going to be in the extended episode available on Patreon. No, adamant no. I love that.
Adamant no.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you so much, Daisy, for coming on the podcast and telling us all about your kind of experiences in publishing, your journey as a literary agent and everything you've been up to these past few years. It's been really cool chatting with you.
Oh, thank you.
And if anyone wants to keep up with what Daisy is doing, you can follow her on Twitter at Daisy Chandley. And if you're interested in querying Daisy or any of the other PFT agents, head over to petersfrazerdunlop.com, where you'll find the submission guidelines and a detailed description of what Daisy and the other agents are looking for, as well as their email addresses. To support the podcast, like, follow and subscribe, join the Patreon for ad-free extended episodes, and check out my other podcast, The Chosen Ones and Other Tropes. Thanks again, Daisy, and thanks to everyone listening. We will catch you on the next episode.